I stood at my kitchen counter in Calgary, watching the snow fall gently outside my window, when my daughter-in-law Vanessa walked in and said the words that would change everything. "Margaret, we need to talk about your living situation." I looked up from the vegetables I was chopping. I'd been making dinner for the family, as I did most nights. Vanessa stood there with her arms crossed, her expression a mixture of concern and something else I couldn't quite place. "My living situation?" I asked carefully. "Yes. David and I have been talking, and we think it's time you considered moving to a senior's residence. You know, somewhere with people your age, activities, proper care." I set down my knife. "Vanessa, I'm 68, not 98. I don't need care." "That's not the point, Margaret. This house is too big for you now. You rattle around in here all alone." "Well, except when we visit." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We're just worried about you. The thing is, they didn't visit. They lived here, in my house." Let me back up. 3 years ago, my son David came to me with a problem. He and Vanessa were going through financial difficulties. His small accounting practice wasn't bringing in enough, and Vanessa had just lost her job as a marketing manager. They had an 8-year-old daughter, my granddaughter Sophie, and they were about to lose their apartment. "Mom, I hate to ask," David had said, sitting at this very kitchen table, "but could we stay with you, just for a few months, until we get back on our feet?" What kind of mother says no to that? My husband Thomas had passed away 4 years earlier, and this big 4-bedroom house in Mount Royal did feel empty. I'd worked as a nurse for 40 years, retired with a good pension, and owned this house outright. I had the space. I had the means. "Of course you can stay," I'd said. "Family helps family." That was 3 years ago. 3 years of watching them settle in. 3 years of my guest room becoming their master suite. 3 years of my home office becoming Sophie's playroom. 3 years of cooking, cleaning, and being told I was doing it wrong. "The thing is, Margaret," Vanessa continued, her voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd grown to recognize, "David and I have been thinking. This house is perfect for a growing family. Sophie needs more space as she gets older. We could really make this work as our permanent home." "It is your home," I said quietly. "You're welcome here." "No, you don't understand." She stepped closer. "We mean as our home. David and I think you'd be much happier somewhere designed for seniors. Somewhere you'd have your own space, your own place." There it was. In my own house, I was being told I needed my own place. I took a breath. "This is my home, Vanessa. Thomas and I bought it 35 years ago. We raised David here." "Exactly. It's full of old memories. Don't you think it's time for new ones? Fresh start for everyone?" I looked at her carefully. She was nervous, I realized. Her hands were fidgeting with her wedding ring, and she wouldn't quite meet my eyes. "I'll think about it," I said finally. She brightened immediately. "Great. I actually have some brochures in my bag. There's a lovely place in Thorncliffe. I drove by it last week." "Very nice." After she left the kitchen, I stood there for a long time. Something felt wrong, deeply wrong. It wasn't just the suggestion itself, though that was hurtful enough. It was the way she'd said it, like it was already decided, like I was just being informed of a plan already in motion. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, the one I'd shared with Thomas, staring at the ceiling. Around 2 in the morning, I got up to get some water. As I passed David's old room, now their bedroom, I saw light under the door. I heard voices. I know I shouldn't have listened. But something made me stop. "She's going to resist," David's voice, muffled through the door. "She already is," Vanessa replied. "But it doesn't matter. Once we establish residency, she can't just kick us out." "Are you sure about this?" "David, I've done the research. In Alberta, if someone lives in a property continuously as their primary residence for at least 10 years, they can potentially claim adverse possession. We're already 3 years in." My blood ran cold. "But it's my mother's house," David said, though his voice lacked conviction. "And she wants us to have a good life, doesn't she? She said yes when we moved in. She's been letting us live here rent-free for 3 years. A court could see that as abandonment of full ownership rights. Besides, once she's in a care home, who's going to manage this place? It only makes sense that we take over. She's not sick, Vanessa. She doesn't need a care home. Not yet, but everyone gets old, David. And when she does need care, do you really think she'll be able to afford both this house and a facility? We'd be doing her a favor by taking this burden off her hands now. I stood frozen in the hallway, my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. This was my son, my child, planning to take my home. I don't know, David said. It feels wrong. What feels wrong is living in a cramped apartment when your mother has 4 bedrooms she doesn't use. What feels wrong is Sophie not having a proper yard to play in. What feels wrong is us struggling while she sits on a property worth over $1 million. I walked back to my room as quietly as I could. I sat on my bed in the darkness, shaking. When Thomas died, David had been my rock. He'd held me at the funeral. He'd stayed with me for weeks afterward, making sure I ate, helping me sort through Thomas's things. That David, I thought I knew. This David? This David was a stranger. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to react emotionally. I wasn't going to confront them in anger or hurt. I was going to be smart, strategic. I'd been a nurse in emergency medicine for 40 years. I knew how to stay calm in a crisis. First thing Monday morning, I called a lawyer. Her name was Patricia Chen, and she'd been recommended by a friend from my book club. I sat in her modern downtown office and told her everything. Can they do this? I asked. Can they actually take my house? Patricia leaned back in her chair. Let's talk about adverse possession in Alberta. The law requires continuous possession for at least 10 years, and the possession must be open, notorious, exclusive, and adverse to the owner's interests. You're living in the house with them, and they're there with your permission. That's not adverse possession. Relief flooded through me. However, Patricia continued, and my relief evaporated. If you moved out and they remained, if they began paying the property taxes, if they made significant improvements, if they openly held themselves out as owners, then after 10 years, they could potentially have a claim. Not a strong one given the circumstances, but possible. They're trying to convince me to move to a senior's home. Patricia's expression hardened. Then we need to act now. You need to protect yourself, Margaret. Over the next week, I quietly put things in order. I updated my will, making it explicitly clear that the house was mine and would remain mine until my death, at which point it would go to charity unless I specified otherwise. I documented everything, every conversation, every manipulation. Patricia helped me prepare an eviction notice. Are you sure you want to do this? She asked. This is your son, which is why I have to, I said. If I let this continue, I'm teaching him that manipulation and betrayal are acceptable. I'm teaching my granddaughter that it's okay to take advantage of people who love you. But I needed one more piece. Something felt off beyond just the house scheme. Vanessa's nervousness, her urgency. There was something else. I started paying attention, really paying attention. And I noticed things. Vanessa was on her phone constantly, texting, smiling at messages, turning the screen away when anyone came near. She'd started dressing up more when she went out, claiming she had job interviews. But she'd been going to interviews 3 times a week for months now with no job offers. One afternoon, Vanessa announced she had another interview. Sophie was at school, David was at work. I told Vanessa I had a doctor's appointment in the same direction and offered to drive her. No, that's okay, she said quickly. I'll take the C train. Don't be silly. Save the fare. She couldn't refuse without being obvious, so she agreed. I drove her to an address in Kensington, an upscale neighborhood. But it wasn't an office building. It was a luxury condo complex. This is where your interview is? I asked innocently. Yes, the company CEO lives here. He works from home. She got out quickly. Thanks for the ride. I parked around the corner and waited. An hour later, I saw her leaving the building. But she wasn't alone. She was with a man, maybe 45, well-dressed. He kissed her goodbye. Not a friendly kiss. Not a professional kiss. I took out my phone and snapped a photo. Over the next 2 weeks, I followed her 3 more times. Same building, same man. I hired a private investigator, a retired RCMP officer Patricia recommended. His report came back with a name. Marcus Holloway, divorced, owns a tech consulting firm, and yes, he and Vanessa had been seen together regularly for the past 8 months. 8 months. While living in my house, while planning to take my house, while my son worked long hours trying to rebuild his practice, the pieces fell into place. Vanessa wasn't just trying to take my home. She was planning her exit from David, but she wanted to exit with assets. If she could establish that this house was their marital home, that they had ownership interest, then in a divorce, she'd be entitled to half of its value. Even a partial claim on $1 million property in Mount Royal would set her up nicely for her new life with Marcus. I sat with all this information for days. Part of me wanted to tell David immediately, but another part of me knew I had to do this right. I had to protect both him and myself. I called Patricia. I'm ready to proceed. She drafted the eviction notice. In Alberta, I had to give them 90 days. 90 days to find a new place and leave my home. That evening, I waited until we were all at dinner. Sophie was chattering about her school day. David was tired, barely touching his food. Vanessa was checking her phone under the table. I have an announcement, I said. They all looked up. I've decided I'm not moving to a senior's home. This is my house, and I'm staying in it. Vanessa's fork clattered to her plate. Margaret, we talked about this. No, you talked. I listened. Now I'm talking. I pulled out the eviction notice and slid it across the table to David. I'm giving you 90 days to find your own place. David stared at the paper like it might bite him. Mom, what is this? What does it look like, son? It's an eviction notice. You need to leave. You can't do this. Vanessa stood up, her face flushed. We have rights. We've lived here for 3 years. With my permission, in my house, paying no rent. You have exactly the rights I've allowed you to have, and now I'm revoking them. David, say something. Vanessa turned to him. David was still staring at the notice, his face pale. Mom, why are you doing this? Why don't you tell her, David? Vanessa snapped. Tell her about the research you've been doing? The room went silent. What research? I asked quietly. David's face went from pale to gray. I was just looking into property law. I wanted to understand our situation. What situation would that be? The situation where you live in my home rent-free? Or the situation where you're researching how to steal it from me? Mom, no, it wasn't like that. Then what was it like? My voice stayed calm, measured. Explain to me how researching adverse possession and tenant rights in your mother's home isn't exactly what it looks like. Vanessa cut in. She doesn't understand how hard it's been for us. Hard? I opened my home to you. I've cooked your meals, watched your daughter, paid utilities you couldn't afford. I've asked for nothing except respect, and you've repaid me by plotting to take my home. We weren't plotting, David said weakly. I wanted to know what would happen if we stayed here long term, if we made this our permanent home, without consulting me, without asking, just researching legal loopholes to take what's mine. Sophie had started crying. I softened my voice. Sweetheart, go to your room for a bit, okay? This is grown-up talk. After Sophie left, I turned back to David and Vanessa. I think we're done here. You have 90 days. We're not leaving, Vanessa said defiantly. We'll fight this. You can't just throw out your own family. Actually, I can. I've already spoken with a lawyer. The eviction is legal and binding. If you're not out in 90 days, I'll have the sheriff remove you. David! Vanessa turned to him, demanding support. But David was looking at me with tears in his eyes. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It was just, Vanessa said, she thought. She thought what? That I was too old and stupid to notice? That I'd just roll over and let you take everything Thomas and I built? We built this too, Vanessa shouted. We've maintained this house. We've improved it. You painted a bedroom. That's not improvement, that's redecorating with my permission. Vanessa's phone buzzed. She grabbed it reflexively, and I saw her face change when she read the message. A small, secret smile before she remembered where she was and schooled her expression back to anger. Who's Marcus? I asked. The color drained from her face. What? Marcus Holloway. The man you've been visiting in Kensington 3 times a week for the past 8 months. David's head snapped toward Vanessa. What is she talking about? I have no idea what she's talking about. She's confused. She's making things up. I pulled out my phone and showed David the photos. Vanessa leaving the building with Marcus. The kiss, multiple dates, multiple angles, all time-stamped. David stared at the screen. His hands started shaking. I hired a private investigator, I continued. Marcus Holloway, 46, divorced, tech consultant. Net worth approximately $3 million. Much better prospect than an accountant struggling to rebuild his practice, I imagine. David, I can explain, Vanessa started. Explain what? His voice broke. Explain how you've been cheating on me in my mother's house while planning to take that house in a divorce? That's not, I wasn't. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. David stood up, the eviction notice crumpling in his fist. Were you ever going to tell me? There's nothing to tell. She's lying. The photos are lying? The investigation report is lying? I kept my voice steady. David, I'm sorry you're finding out this way, but you need to know what's been happening in your own marriage. Vanessa turned on me, her face twisted with rage. You bitter old woman, you're just jealous that David chose me over you. David chose you, I agreed, and you chose Marcus. While living under my roof, eating my food, planning to steal my house. So yes, Vanessa, you need to leave, both for your infidelity and your conspiracy to commit real estate fraud. Fraud? It's not fraud. Actually, I said, pulling out another document. According to my lawyer, making false claims of ownership or adverse possession with intent to defraud the legal owner could constitute criminal fraud under the Canadian Criminal Code. Would you like to test that in court? The fight went out of her. She grabbed her phone and her purse. I'm calling Marcus. I'm leaving tonight. Good idea, I said. You have 90 days to get your things out. After that, anything remaining becomes garbage. She stormed out. We heard the front door slam. David collapsed back into his chair. I didn't know about Marcus. I believe you. But I did. I did research the property thing. Vanessa, she kept saying. She said it was normal to wonder about our future here, about what would happen long term. David. I sat down across from him. You're 41 years old. Do you know how I know that? He looked up, confused by the question. Because I was there when you were born. I held you. I raised you. I taught you right from wrong, or at least, I thought I did. Mom, I'm so sorry. Sorry isn't enough. You need to understand what you did. You came to me in need, and I helped you. That's what mothers do. But you mistook my generosity for weakness. You mistook my love for an opportunity. I know, you're right. I'm not finished. My voice was firm now. You let your wife manipulate you into betraying me. You let financial stress override your moral compass. And worst of all, you were teaching Sophie that this behavior is acceptable, that using people is okay if you're struggling, that family obligations only go one way. David put his head in his hands. What do I do? You find an apartment, you file for divorce, you rebuild your life without stealing from your mother. Can I still see you? I was quiet for a moment. That depends. On what? On whether you mean it when you say you're sorry, on whether you actually change. Words are easy, David. Actions matter. I'll prove it to you. I will. You have 90 days. The next 3 months were difficult. Vanessa moved out that night, went straight to Marcus's condo, according to the investigator. She came back twice to pack her things, always when she knew I wouldn't be home. David found a small 2-bedroom apartment in Bowness. Nothing fancy, but clean and affordable. Sophie was the hardest part. She cried when they told her they were moving. She didn't understand why Grandma was making them leave. I sat down with her one afternoon, just the two of us, in what used to be her playroom. Sophie, sweetheart, do you know why your dad and mom came to live with me? Because they needed help. That's right. And I was happy to help them. That's what families do. But do you know what else families do? She shook her head. Families respect each other. When someone helps you, you don't try to take advantage of that help. You don't try to take what isn't yours. Is that what Mommy and Daddy did? Your daddy made a mistake. He's learning from it. Your mommy, well, your mommy made different choices, but this isn't your fault, and I still love you very much. Will I still get to see you? Every week, if you want. Your dad is going to bring you for dinner every Sunday, and you can call me anytime." She hugged me tight. "I'm sorry, Grandma." "You have nothing to be sorry for, sweet girl. Nothing at all." David moved out on day 87. He was true to his word, taking only what was his, leaving the house cleaner than it had been in years. As he was loading the last box into his truck, he turned to me. "Mom, I know I have no right to ask this, but can I come in for a minute?" We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where this had all begun. "I've been going to therapy," he said. "The therapist says I have codependency issues. That I let Vanessa manipulate me because I was afraid of being alone after my business struggles. That's good that you're getting help. She also said I need to make amends. Real ones, not just words." He slid an envelope across the table. "I can't pay you back for 3 years of rent and food. Not right now, but this is a start. It's $5,000. I'll send more each month until I've paid you back fairly for what we took from you." I opened the envelope. There was a check and a handwritten note that simply said, "I'm sorry, Mom. I love you." "You don't have to do this," I said, though I was touched. "Yes, I do. I have to make this right. Not to get back in your good graces, though I hope someday I will be, but because it's the right thing to do." I looked at my son. He'd lost weight, had dark circles under his eyes, but there was something different in his expression, something clearer. "Thank you, David. Sophie talks about you constantly. She misses you." "I miss her too. How is she handling everything?" "Better than I expected. The divorce is moving forward. Vanessa wants full custody, but given the circumstances, my lawyer thinks I'll get at least 50%. She's already moved in with Marcus. I'm sorry your marriage ended this way. I'm sorry I was too blind to see what was happening. In a weird way, Mom, you saved me. If you hadn't done this, if you'd just accepted what we were doing, I might have woken up 10 years from now as an accomplice to stealing your house, still married to a woman who didn't love me, having taught my daughter that manipulation is how you get what you want. You're a good man, David. You made bad choices, but you're not a bad person. I want to earn back your trust. Then, keep showing up, keep doing the right thing, keep being honest, even when it's hard." He hugged me before he left. It wasn't the same as it used to be, that hug. There was too much hurt between us, but it was a start. That night, alone in my house for the first time in 3 years, I walked through every room. My bedroom, where I'd lain awake listening to plans to betray me. The kitchen, where I'd cooked thousands of meals for people who saw me as an obstacle. The living room where Sophie had played, innocent of the schemes happening around her. But I also remembered the good times. David as a little boy, running through these halls. Thomas and me, slow dancing in the kitchen on our anniversary. Family Christmases, birthday parties, quiet Sunday mornings. This house held joy and pain, love and betrayal. It was complicated, like family always is. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. I'd been putting off a decision, but now it was time. I opened my email and replied to an invitation I'd received months ago. My friend Janet from nursing school had been asking me to visit her in Victoria for years. "Come for a month," she kept saying. "See the ocean, we'll drink wine and pretend we're young again." I booked the flight. 1 month in Victoria, leaving in 2 weeks. I also enrolled in a watercolor painting class at the Kirby Center, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for. And I called Sophie. "How would you like to help Grandma plant a garden this spring?" "Really? Can we grow strawberries?" "Absolutely, and tomatoes, and whatever else you want." The next Sunday, David brought Sophie for dinner as promised. I made her favorite, homemade mac and cheese with breadcrumbs on top. We sat around the same table, but now it felt different, lighter somehow. "Grandma, Dad says you're going to Victoria," Sophie said excitedly. "I am. For a whole month. Will you take pictures?" "I'll take hundreds, and I'll video chat with you every week." David looked at me. "Mom, are you sure you'll be okay? That's a long time to be away." "I'll be fine. Mrs. Kim next door is going to keep an eye on the house, and you have a key if anything comes up. You're trusting me with a key? You're still my son, David. I'm angry, I'm hurt, but I haven't stopped loving you." His eyes got watery. "I don't deserve that. Probably not. But love isn't always about what we deserve, though boundaries are about what we'll accept." After dinner, while Sophie was watching TV, David helped me with the dishes. "I saw Vanessa yesterday," he said quietly. "She was dropping off some of Sophie's things. She asked if you'd reported her to the police." "I haven't." "Why not? You could. The lawyer said you had grounds." I dried a plate carefully. "Because the point wasn't revenge, David. The point was protection. I protected my home. I protected you from making a terrible mistake. And I protected Sophie from learning the wrong lessons about family. Sending Vanessa to jail doesn't accomplish anything except more pain. You're a better person than I am. I'm just older. I've had more time to learn that holding on to anger only hurts the person holding it. I'm not saying I forgive her or that what she did was okay, but I'm not going to let it poison the rest of my life. What about me? Do you think you'll ever really forgive me?" I turned to look at him. "I think forgiveness is a process, not an event. You're doing the work. You're showing up, paying me back, getting therapy, being a good father. Keep doing that. In time, yes, I think I'll forgive you. Thank you, Mom." That night, after they left, I sat in my living room with a glass of wine. The house was quiet, but it wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. I thought about posting something on Facebook, on the local community page where so many people shared their stories, but then I decided against it. This wasn't about public vindication. It was about private integrity. Instead, I opened my journal, something I'd started keeping again, and I wrote, "I learned something important these past few months. Helping others is beautiful and necessary. But helping someone doesn't mean sacrificing yourself. It doesn't mean allowing yourself to be used or betrayed. There's a difference between generosity and martyrdom. I also learned that you can love someone and still hold them accountable. That boundaries aren't punishments, they're protection. That saying no to manipulation isn't cruelty, it's self-respect. Most importantly, I learned that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. At 68, I reclaimed my home, my dignity, and my peace. If I can do it, anyone can. To anyone reading this who might be in a similar situation, your kindness is not weakness. Your generosity should not be exploited. You have the right to protect what's yours, to demand respect, and to remove people from your life who treat your love as an opportunity. Family is important, but so are you. Never forget that. I closed the journal and looked around my home. My home. Not their home. Not a future asset to be divided. Not a bargaining chip. Mine. 3 months later, I was in Victoria with Janet, watching the sunset over the ocean, when my phone rang. It was David. "Mom, I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all. What's up?" "I just wanted to tell you something. Sophie had a project at school about heroes. She wrote about you." "About me?" "About how you taught her that it's important to stand up for yourself, even when it's hard. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say no." I felt my eyes getting wet. "She wrote that?" "She did. Her teacher called me in to talk about it. She said Sophie's essay was the most mature thing she'd read from a 10-year-old. She asked if Sophie had experienced something that taught her this." "What did you tell her?" "I told her yes. I told her Sophie's grandmother had taught our whole family about courage and boundaries, and that I was grateful for it, even though it was painful." We talked for a few more minutes before hanging up. Janet looked at me curiously. "Everything okay?" "Everything's perfect," I said. And it was. Not because everything was easy, or because all the hurt was gone, or because my family was whole again, but because I'd chosen myself. I'd chosen my dignity. I'd chosen to teach the people I loved that respect isn't optional, it's essential. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Somewhere back in Calgary, my house stood waiting for me. My house, with its memories and its scars and its future. And when I returned, I'd plant that garden with Sophie. I'd continue Sunday dinners with David. I'd take my painting classes and live my life on my own terms. Because I'd learned the most important lesson of all. You can be generous without being a doormat. You can be loving without being exploited. You can be family without being a victim. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for someone is to show them where the line is, even if it means showing them the door. My home was mine again, but more importantly, so was I.